far as the cast goes, we've got Gemma Redgrave, who plays Kate Stewart, and who plays Kate Stewart in Doctor Who. She's one of the two main female characters. Kathleen Wilhoit is the other main lead character, and she's very well known for a lot of roles over the years. She's probably the most well-known actor in the cast. For me personally, I know a lot of these people have other credits, but for me personally, those two were actors I recognized, and the other is Timothy Spall, who, anybody who's familiar with the Harry Potter movies, he's Peter Pettigrew, otherwise known as Wormtail. And I don't know if there's a monster in the movie, there are actually sort of several monsters in various ways. In fact, there aren't really any of the male characters that come across as even very likable. They're all kind of bad characters, but at least the characters you know anything about. But if anyone is a monster in the movie, probably his character is more of a monster than the rest. But in any event, so you'll recognize some of these actors. There might be some other actors you recognize more. This whole thing is great because they've taken the original negatives and they've remastered it and to make a great director's cut that is excellent. The Blu-ray also includes the original theatrical release. There are a number of other extras. There's a documentary that was filmed at the time that's pretty interesting. But for me, I think the most interesting things were the interviews with, they've got interview with the director, a number of the cast members' interviews, and even Bill Nelson, which, I don't know, I'm a fan of Bill Nelson's music, so for me, that was kind of probably the shining interview of the bunch. But in any event, these are all new interviews that have been just done for this release, and all that's included on there. There are some other bonus features, photo gallery and stuff, but it all comes out to being this really, really exceptional release. And it's a movie that was basically lost, and to me, having this movie out there is great because it is a movie that shouldn't have been lost. It's very different from a lot of other films, yet it has some scares. It'll make you think. You'll probably be sitting and thinking about this movie for a long time after you see it because it's just that sort of film. And the acting is great. I don't know, you need to see it. It's a very well done movie. Sure, some of the effects look a little hokey by today's standards, but it still holds up. So anyway, check out Dream Demon, and let's all be happy that Arrow has taken the time to do such a great job on reissuing this film and getting it back out there in the public. So this is the next spooky review from Spooky Ventures, and I'm going to be looking at a movie called Dream Demon. Now, the movie was originally released in 1988, but it was sort of lost, and it basically was released in the UK. It was supposed to be released in the US, but that never happened, and then it just sort of vanished. The company that made it went out of business, and it just sort of sat around. Well, in 2020, Arrow Films, now I'm going to be doing a lot of these Arrow Films reviews. They've sent me a number of movies to look at and review, and but they got a hold of it. There's a whole story involved in it. We're finding the master negatives and all this, and but in any event, they've released it on Blu-ray now. And it's really a great thing that they have because it's quite an exceptional film. It's interesting in a lot of ways. Number one, it sort of blurs the lines between reality, memory, and dream. In comparisons, you had a 1980s movie coming out horror movie that's based a lot on dreams. Of course, the comparisons to Nightmare on Elm Street are there. There are some scenes that sort of feel a little like Nightmare on Elm Street, but honestly, it's a completely different film. The concept's completely different. And really, the whole idea of dreams as horror films and dreams merging with reality and blurring goes back at least as far as Edgar Allan Poe. Lovecraft had his whole dream cycle. So it's not like Wes Craven had the market cornered on dream horror. There was Dreamscape that came before Nightmare on Elm Street. But in any event, just the whole concept of you don't know what's real, you don't know what's memory, that's kind of a unique, or at least an interesting world for it to be in. The effects are all practical effects, and they work pretty darn well. It's not a gore-heavy movie or an effects-heavy movie. It's more of a psychological horror movie. But there is plenty of gore and, jumps and things like that. There were a lot of questions that I felt were sort of left unanswered at the end, but it doesn't bother me because there's a sort of mysterious quality to the film, and I think that actually adds to it, not really having all the answers spelled out. Also, another thing that's unusual about this film is that there really aren't male hero characters. It's two female characters who are somehow connected, and we get a little bit of the connection between the two that has to do with the house, but there's always sort of an idea that there's some other connection between them. And I don't really know what that connection is. Like I say, that's one of those mysteries. But it's interesting that the two hero characters, the two main characters, are female. It's kind of an unusual thing. Even to this day, that's kind of unusual. So it was kind of forward-thinking. And it's just generally a great spooky, sort of trippy film that I found to be very enjoyable. And it seems, compared to a lot of 80s movies, you know how you could tell by the hairstyles and the clothing and the music especially that a movie came out in the 80s. It's not really true with this film. Part of that is Bill Nelson, who is known for Bebop Deluxe, and I've reviewed him quite a bit at Music Street Journal, both his solo stuff and Bebop Deluxe stuff, did the soundtrack, and he had never really done a movie soundtrack before. In fact, there's a nice interview with him on the Blu-ray where he talks about how he went through doing all that. And I think it avoids a lot of those 80s stereotypical sounds that really just date films. So I think that's one good aspect about it. Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.